So we have used, I've taught you a couple different ways of collecting evidence for essays. All right, so the first way we said is sometimes your reasons or ways that you're using are not easily understandable. Therefore, you need to have an explanation. And we looked at some examples of reasons or ways, and we had said not every single reason or way requires an explanation. Okay, so you as the writer have to make that decision. Is the reader going to get this, or is they not going to get it? If they're not going to get it, then you have to make sure you provide an explanation. And the explanation should always come first in your evidence. The second thing that we did is we talked about mini stories. So sometimes what writers do is they think about one particular event or time that proves that reason or way, and they retell that one particular moment. And they're using the language of the disciplines. They're using similes and anaphora and hyperboles and personification and metaphors. Okay, so it's one particular time. However, sometimes you have some writers where their thesis does not, and their reason or ways does not require an explanation, and it does not require a mini story. Raise your hand if you fall into that category. All right. Well, you might someday. So if that is the case, the third type of evidence is just basically a list of examples. So let me show you what I mean. So if you look up here, let's say a list of examples is basically where you're providing examples. You're not telling the examples in detail, okay? So there's a difference between a mini story. A mini story, it has a beginning, a middle, and an end. It explains the example in detail, but not too much detail. And it has to be angled to prove your thesis, which we talked about. Remember how I said, you get the white slip, and you go tell the story to your friend, and then you tell the story to your dad, and then is the story different? Yes. All right. So now with examples, a list of examples, you start off with one example, okay? You briefly explain this example, then you proceed on to another example, all right? Then, so usually when you're talking about examples, you usually want to do like 2 or 3, okay? You never just want to give one, it's like 2 or 3. So if we're going along the lines, this is my thesis, right? Some people think that garbage is the stuff that sits on the curb for the sanitation people to take. However, I could not disagree enough. Garbage is hidden treasures that can be turned into beautiful prized possessions that adorn a household. So as you remember, I was kind of proving this with parts. I was saying that there's garbage in my dining room, there's garbage in my kitchen, and there's garbage outside. So I have to ask myself, okay, which one of these could I come up with a list of examples for? All right, so pens are down and eyes should be up here. So I said, so just thinking about it, I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to kind of think about my kitchen. I could give the example of I have this ugly, I don't like it, but my husband seems to like it. I don't know why he cares so much about decorating. But it's this.
You say like at the end of the story, like, oh, it's so beautiful.
It is beautiful. No, the picture. So there's this. So one example I have is there's this. It's a picture of a flower. And I believe where we had gotten this picture from is somebody was having a yard sale, and the yard sale was over. You know how they put all their stuff on the curb? That's my husband's favorite time, is when all the garbage is in the garbage. So I could talk about the picture of the flower. But I could also talk about, there's this like white vase. All right? Then the third example I could talk about was the French door. But here's the deal. With the French door, I already gave a mini story for it, right? So I guess I really wouldn't want to use that. So all I have to do is I have to briefly explain these examples, all right? So if you look up here, all right, I have my possible examples. Oh, and the countertop. I have a countertop, the soapstone countertop, okay? The white porcelain vase. And the French door. So I wouldn't want to use the French door because I already told the mini story about that. So I'm not going to use that. So I'm going to use these other 3. So when I write it, go ahead and look at this. Read it to yourself for a moment, then we'll talk about it. In my kitchen, there is an island. On top of the island is a stunning piece of jet black soapstone. Jeff salvaged this piece of garbage from the school's dumpster. So basically, I'm identifying my example, and I'm just briefly explaining it, right? I'm not going into detail about the time, you know, he went in and he called me up on the phone. He's like, oh my God, there's this beautiful thing in the dumpster I think I'm going to get, and I'm yelling at him, no, don't get it. Nope, I didn't go into detail. So the example is just providing a brief explanation. Besides the soapstone countertop, there's also the beautiful flower painting that is hanging on the kitchen wall. When he found this, it was on the side of the road and had a cracked wooden frame. He replaced the frame and now it looks as good as new. Oh, and I cannot forget to mention the white Italian porcelain vase I use daily to hold the fresh cut flowers my husband brings home for me. Yeah, right. This beauty was actually discovered behind ShopRite. So all I did is I provided 3 examples giving a brief explanation, and that's all it is. So what we're going to do is we're going to try this together. So let's say if we have, once again, this whole thesis, it's difficult to adapt to middle school. So our 3 reasons were making new friends is challenging, academics become harder, and there are new routines you have to get used to. So think right now, which of these could we provide examples? Not necessarily a mini story, but a list of examples to kind of prove. So talk it over in your groups right now. So we're going to practice this with this one. We came up with a list of examples of new routines. So we said you have to change for gym, you have lockers, the classes change each marking period, and you switch classes. So that gives us 4 examples to explain as evidence. And like I just said, you are not going to just list them. Think of it as a list of examples with a brief explanation. All right? So what we're going to do right now is we're going to go ahead and write this all together. Okay, so first off, I need my topic sentence. So the topic sentence has to state your first reason or way, that you're trying to prove. Now, we had talked about there's 2 types, there's 2 ways you can transition into this. What are those 2 ways you can transition into this? Yes?
A transitional sentence.
Perfect. Transitional sentence or?
Transitional word.
Transitional word. What do we want to use?
Transitional sentence.
Yes. Okay, so now we want to use a transitional sentence. So the whole thing has to do with routines, right? So come up with a transitional sentence that would be the very first sentence in that paragraph proving that these new routines are challenging. And I think we might have done this previously. So go ahead and turn and talk to your partner. All right, so now we thought about we have to introduce this whole topic of routines. So we want to come up with a transitional sentence that introduces a topic of routines and states your reason or way. So far I have my little introduction that says routines are great, right? And once again, I'm talking to the audience so they feel like, you know, they have a connection with you as the writer. You know exactly what is going to happen. There's no elements of surprise. This all changes in middle school. So here's my topic sentence. What was it? Routines are challenging to. There are new routines students have to get used to. All right, so now I have my transitional sentence. Now I have to go on to my examples. Okay, so raise your hand, what was the very first example that we had up there? Or one of them, I don't care which one was first. Yes? All right. So, first off, there is the changing of classes. So that's my first example. I have to angle this example to show the reader that this is so hard. So I'm not just putting down my example and then going on to my next example. That's not what I want you to do. So somebody give me like a brief explanation of this and how it's hard. So So our first example is we have this transitional word. Like, first off, there is a changing of classes. Not only do you have to remember what class you have on what day, but you have to get there on time. Give me a sentence that shows that this is so hard. This is like agonizing because you have to angle this. I don't care if you use one of these language of the disciplines. Go ahead. So I would have added, so this is so impossible to gather all your books together and rush to the other side of the building. It's almost like you have to be Superman to get there. All right? So that is my first example. Now, I'll wait.